Hello and welcome to my tiny tarot practice. I'm Amelia Ruby, and on this show, I share my tiny tarot practice as I study the tarot, going card by card, first through the minor arcana, and now in this fifth and final season through the major. This season of the show is presented by Tarot for Creative Spirits by Cecily Saylor, and I hope that you will head to the show notes to learn more about this amazing creative workbook and to find your exclusive discount code to get your copy today. In this episode, we are uncovering the hierophant. In the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the deck, the hierophant depicts a person on a throne. They are obviously a religious figure, and they definitely look like a pope with a red cloak and vestments on, as well as a golden crown, one hand held with two fingers up toward the sky, the other holding a scepter. There are two pillars in the background of this figure on the throne, evocative of the pillars in the high priestess. And in front of this person, situated below them, perhaps kneeling or just at a lower distance, we see two figures who are in kind of very fancy tunics looking up at the hierophant. And between them, there are two keys crossed. With the hierophant, we encounter a depiction of doctrine-oriented religion. And we see the hierophant as the figure who holds the keys to the secrets and the sacred texts of that religion. Similar to the emperor, I think that many of us may have some big feelings when we pull this card, or we may encounter it with a sense of dis-ease, especially if we have ever been harmed by traditional religious structures or figures, or if we have encountered religious doctrines that have rejected us or discriminated against us. And I think that with the hierophant, we see a much more rule-oriented sense of religion than we did in the high priestess, which makes sense in that this image of religion comes after society in the major arcana. So if we think about our journey through the major arcana so far, we start with the naive, blissful image of the fool moving into the potent magic of the magician, the intuitive, sacred nature of the high priestess, the nature itself of the empress, society and power in the emperor. And now we see this return to belief in the divine, but through the lens of society, bringing the rules of the emperor along with it, as opposed to the deep depths of intuition that led us toward religion and the high priestess. And I'll be quite honest that I never relish in receiving the hierophant or working with this archetype. I think because, like many of us, I turned to tarot as an alternative to doctrine-oriented religions, as a different type of relationship to spirituality. But I think the hierophant appears here as a reminder that we're still in conversation with this archetype, even if we, like me, critique or reject it. I really love something that Rachel Pollack says about the hierophant in 78 Degrees of Wisdom, where she writes about the relationship and the imagery of the hierophant, the lovers, and the chariot cards, which are the 5, 6, and 7 in the major arcana. And there she writes, "The hierophant initiates two acolytes into his church. We see, therefore, that the hierophant and the lovers and the chariot all represent attempts to mediate between the opposing poles of life and find some way not to resolve them, but simply to hold them in balance. A religious doctrine with its moral codes and explanations for life's most basic questions does just that. If we surrender ourselves to a church, the contradictions of life all become answered, but not resolved." I love this sense of the hierophant as symbolizing the desire for answers about the divine. And I think that if we're working with this archetype, there's an invitation to consider, where are we seeking answers and what are those answers yielding? Are we holding on to answers in places where perhaps we can only ever hold questions? And if we do reject an organized religion or doctrine that we encounter early in our lives, the hierophant perhaps asks us if we've just replaced that doctrine with another one. Whether it be rejecting one religion for another or a religious doctrine for a capitalist doctrine. There are many ways that we wrap our lives around ideology, and I think the hierophant invites us to question that. Or at least that's the invitation I take up when I pull this card in a reading. The hierophant is also a particular image of the teacher and the guide. And so this card also invites us to consider if we're being called to seek guidance or to offer guidance. When I pull this card, I will often ask myself if I am feeling more of an identification with the hierophant on the throne or with the acolytes below looking up at the hierophant. This is the first card in the major arcana that depicts multiple people, and I think it can be a really playful way to engage with the tarot to consider which figure we identify with in a card and why. And so I've offered many different pathways into the hierophant in this exploration. I think that with this card, we can explore religion, we can explore doctrine, we can explore ideology, we can explore the archetype of the religious leader, the priest, or the teacher, the guide, the mentor, or the follower, the acolyte, the one who seeks to be led. And we can approach all of those positions, all of those themes and archetypes with an open, neutral mind, considering how they're landing in our lives right now. For one person, doctrine may be providing a necessary solve during a hard time, and for another, it may be bringing a constrictive, oppressive force that's holding them back from their purpose and power. The same religion can do both things, even for each of us at any given time. And this card invites us to step into all of those dynamics as we explore belonging and belief. Thank you so much for listening to my tiny tarot practice and this exploration of the hierophant. This episode is sponsored by Tarot for Creative Spirits by Cecily Saylor, and I hope that you will head to the show notes to purchase your copy of this amazing workbook that includes some really beautiful reflection questions on this card specifically. As I sign off today, I'll simply remind you that I'm Amelia Fruby, and you are listening to My Tiny Tarot Practice.